Hi YouTube. What you're about to see is actually the first draft of a video. It's not something I meant to be put out there for anyone to see, but it was sort of a reaction to a video I'd seen, and it was sort of meant to be just a rough draft, like a video notepad for me to get the ideas down so I wouldn't forget them because I got to go back to work shortly. And it ended up being sort of an impassioned video, and I decided to go ahead and release it to rank criticism, I'm sure, but I like the emotion that came out of me, out of myself at the end, and I sort of feel like maybe that's important to put out there. I can still feel it coursing through me. I just finished the video a few minutes ago. I will link below the video that I saw that sparked this, and it was a video regarding Bible thumping wingnut in Matthew 4:19, talking about atheists justifying whether or not chemical warfare is right or is wrong, or whether it even is wrong in our worldview. And I have to say, I haven't seen the Wingnut show to know even what they were talking about. I assumed in the video that they were talking about the Syrian conflict, but I don't even know. So, the video is rife with a few grammatical errors, I'm sure, some words out of context, and maybe even some concepts that I'm not speaking of correctly. But I really feel like the emotion is worthwhile to release, and we'll just let the chips fall where they may. Normally when I make a video, I'll listen to something and I'll get an idea, I'll roll it around in my head, philosophically for a bit, develop a general concept, and run across the street to the bush across from the shop and cut a video. Usually takes me 3 or 4 takes before I'm about 70% happy with it, and then that's all the time permits, so I'll go ahead and upload it. In this case, it really wasn't meant to be released, but I think in this case it's worthwhile. Be gentle with me, Helen. Hey YouTube, I recently saw a video where the Wingnut and Matthew 4:19 were asking, in light of the events of Syria, for atheists to state why they think chemical warfare is bad, or even if they do think it's bad, and what their justification would be for that. And I think this is really interesting. It's one of these, it's more of the denial that goes on with theists, because this whole concept of subjective and objective morality relates to a video I recently made where I was talking about economies of scale. And so if someone offends against an ant versus a pet versus a human being versus God, the theists will say, well, the punishment is going to incrementally increase. The punishment is going to be proportionate to the being that's being offended against. And so since God is this ultimate supreme being, then the punishment must be ultimate and supreme, and in fact eternal. And of course I would obviously argue that the punishment should fit the crime. At any rate, I was talking about how the same economies of scale are not applied to God. So we make a small mistake, we lust after a woman or something, eternal torment, sorry about your luck. God can create everyone that's ever walked and create them as all flawed beings, using my table analogy, a poor craftsman, no accountability, no responsibility on God's part. And again, I think the punishment should fit the crime, or at least the responsibility should fit the action. But in this case, they've let God straight off the hook. He's scot-free, he's saved harmless. The same when it comes to morality, I think is very interesting. In theory, using economies of scale, the most moral being should be the supreme being. And of course, the lesser moral beings would be the underlings. And thus should be the responsibility for it. If you're a parent, a lot of parents, not myself, but a lot of parents will strike a child to keep them from running out in the street, or would strike a child to keep them from touching a hot stove. There are other methods. I promise you, I have a safe and sound adult daughter to prove it. However, a lot of people do believe that's the way to go about it. And they would justify it by saying, it's the greater good, it's the lesser of the two, it's my responsibility. Even though I might like my child to be able to experience life on their own terms, there are some things where I know absolutely better, and it is my responsibility to protect that child. Likewise, you would think with God, if he is the most moral being, you would think the onus would be on him to intervene wherever injustice is occurring, much like the dogs of war are baying at the Syrian conflict, and many of them are talking about how it's humanitarian. We need to go in and save these people. Politics aside, if that were sort of the noble, laudable goal, might be acceptable. Why is God not morally responsible for his creation? Why is it okay? I was just listening today to some pastors talking about the end times and the multiple wars, not just the war of Armageddon, but all the multiple wars that are going to take place and the billions of people who are going to die and the chemical warfare that's actually going to exist then. So if you want to talk to me about chemical warfare being moral or immoral, you're going to need to look at what your own deity is going to allow to take place and already has, of course, allowed to take place. If you're going to hold atheists' feet to the fire and say, is chemical warfare wrong? And if it's wrong, why is it wrong? I think you need to turn that back to Scripture and ask yourself the question, why God, the most moral being possible, allows it? And before you start talking to me about free will, again, we allow our children to have free will to a point. And then we say, I'm not going to have my child hit by a car on the street, and you're going to act. I'm not going to have my child horribly disfigured by a pot of burning oil on the stove, and you act. So don't talk to me about whether or not chemical warfare is wrong. Absolutely ridiculous. Thanks everyone for watching.